going on, man?
What up, yo?
How are you doing today?
Dude, you rock those that Adidas gear all the time, huh?
It's kind of my
It's
go-to
like a
hat.
nostalgia seeing
Mm,
Adidas gear like that.
right? And I swear I saw it and I was like, oh, that's exactly my. It felt like a '90s 49ers jersey to me or something. Um, but I definitely it was more just I got it because it's a straight up black hat. I'll usually just rock the straight black hats, but you usually have to go to like Lids or something like that to get just the plain black,
Lids.
at least a good plain black. Because there's a lot of places with like regular, excuse me, plain black hats, but they're like cheap or whatever. Yeah, I've been really happy with this one. When I got it, I got like three different colors, just because I just
Nice.
needed something. It was for training and stuff. But I only use the black one ever because I like black. You know, it's classic, classy.
It's thinking about '90s apparel. It's so comical to think about. I guess it's like wearing retro stuff now. I guess that would be a '90s thing or whatever. It's just funny to think about like the windbreakers or the big
Yeah.
baggy jackets, the really bright colors.
Hmm.
I'm trying to think what else, or the gym apparel that we would wear that would
Oh
be really
yeah.
wide and wouldn't fit correctly. It's just really wide. It's like very boxy. You remember that?
Oh yeah, well, and you make me think of the like NBA jerseys from that time too, where they were so much bigger than. Wait, no. I'm mixing them up. They were smaller at that time. I'm confusing myself, but let me switch from the fact that I just said an NBA thing that didn't make any sense. Check out this Casio. It's a Casio that's from the same era that is the greatest tool one trainer can have. You don't need an iPad on your wrist. All you need is a Casio. It tells the time. Got it. Seconds
Huh.
there, minutes. We're good.
I have if you can see a Garmin. I
There
don't
you
think it does
go.
all that like fancy stuff. This isn't like the expensive one. I got this, a long time ago. But the reason I got I don't even. This isn't even a smartwatch, but
Yeah,
like this
it's
watch,
GPS.
it's a pedometer to track steps.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason I originally bought it when I was training for the fire academy, we had to do a timed 3 mile run in under a certain amount of time, and if you couldn't complete that, then you would fail. Right
Mm.
there. So I bought the watch so I could see my pace when I was training to go to the academy, just to make sure I could do the run in the appropriate amount of time. And then ever since then, I've always worn. I've bought a watch or two after that when it broke,
Mm.
but the I started wearing Garmin since then. I didn't really wear watches before, to be honest. Now I like it because of the pedometer aspect, just kind of tracking your steps, even if it's not perfectly accurate. That's what I like it for. I don't know if I ever used a watch training anyone though, but that one's pretty legit that you have.
Oh, it's just for keeping time. It's more than It's not like I'm not usually timing people as much as I'm just keeping an eye on, making sure that I'm, um, you know, on top of my programming more than anything. But I forget what I was gonna say.
You know what the funny thing with like timing, especially in between sets or
Mm,
rest periods, excuse me. I remember when I first started, I would really keep track of that. Like, okay, it's at
mm-hmm.
60 seconds, or okay, it's at 90 seconds. Okay, go. Now, for most movements, especially multi joint movements, I rest a lot longer than I used to,
Mm,
which I'm telling you, that is the way to go
me
for
too.
strength. That's the way
Yeah.
to go some of the time for muscle building and whatnot. But resting until I feel ready to go,
Mm-hmm.
and then a little bit some. That's what I've been doing, at least for like the bigger compound lifts. Like,
Same.
I'm talking resting over 3 minutes in
Yep.
between sets, 3.5 minutes, in between sets of dips or whatever. I know that's like more than enough time, but man, it makes a huge difference when you give your body time to rest between sets.
I'm actually on this a very similar journey myself right now. I mean, my whole life, um, I was taught from a young age that like the optimal way to work out is to break up your resistance training with floor exercises, which are usually a little more cardio centric than the resistance work itself. But as a result, there's lots of little breaks in between, but there's less emphasis on rest as a component, because really you're just kind of, it's just broken up by a bunch of different, periods, short rest periods, right? Well, as we've talked about, not long ago, I started lifting heavy for the first time in my, I shouldn't say first time in my life. I lifted heavy when I played football, but I never lifted heavy post football as an adult, because I just never, that was never my interest, was putting on mass. It was much more of the general, benefits that we talk about, mental health benefits, general maintenance, that type of stuff. Um, and so I've worked out like that for many, many, many years. But in this last year, yeah, I'd say last year or so, I've put a emphasis on actually building muscle. And I got to the point, and I was still working out in the same way as I always did, but I realized as I was going that as my weight is going up, it's happening much more efficiently and much more effectively when I'm using those big rest periods now, because I'm lifting heavy. Because when I was lifting lighter, you're going for reps, you're going for, anaerobic endurance in a lot of cases, or at least some semblance of that relative to what we're talking about now, which is me loading it on as heavy as I can for the amount of amount of reps I want to do, which is usually like 3 to 5 ish, when I'm going up in weight, right? And man, what a difference it's been for not only getting that weight up, more reliably, but it ends up I feel more thoroughly exhausted and satisfied because of it.
I mean, you can exert yourself way more, or at least I would say, I don't know if that's the right word, but focus on the movement a lot more after you rest. Your heart's not racing super fast. You feel ready to go again. So you can definitely put more effort into the set if you would like to.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I love. I've been doing a lot of reps, like kind of around fives or so too. That's been like for a lot of the bigger lifts, like 3 to 5, kind of in there. And man, I loved lifting that way. It's not necessarily like I'm not going to failure on those, but like, it's somewhat heavy, and
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely been a optimal way, at least for me, to lift, with my goal. So I'm gonna probably keep doing this for a while. And what I've been doing too is separating okay, this is the strength training time, and then this is, the cardiorespiratory fitness time. Having those separate pieces, because with, CrossFit back in the day, it was, just doing metcons and just having your heart rate up really high, lifting weights, for minutes at a time, and no rest periods and all that stuff, and just really, I guess you could call it metabolically fatiguing. I don't know if that's really the right word, but
Makes sense.
now it's completely different. I'm telling you, my body feels a lot better doing it this way, like
Mm.
splitting the strength and conditioning. I'm not saying it's bad to, have those middle of the ground glycolytic type of workouts sometimes, but this, for me at least, is the way to go. And it seems like, you're enjoying that too.
Yeah, absolutely. I know there's gonna be times too where in my life I'm gonna kind of revert back to. I'm a big fan of low weight, high rep work, for its calorie burning potential, also for its kind of meditative qualities that you can gain from doing it with that style, especially if if you're able to do it throughout your day. But man, now that I've started doing this in this way where while I'm aggressively, trying, and I say aggressively, much less aggressively than the next person, but more aggressively relative to how I have in the past. You know, as I'm putting on weight, there's just no substitute. You know what I mean? For me, right, is taking that rest, because I'm just not going to I'm not going to be able to lift as heavy as long unless I do that. And I say me and just me, but it's really everybody, right? I mean, that's kind of basic, um, physiological, whatever. I don't want to say fact, but objectively, like we're all kind of, like, it's true across the board.
Are you training when you train yourself? Are you at the studio, or where do you normally train? Are you doing it
Right
still at
here.
home?
Yeah, this
Still at
is this
home.
is my I got my whole setup here. It's got my bench. I've got it's got the look, you want to see all this stuff? I've got my ISO stuff here. I haven't even started using the ISO stuff because I need an Olympic couple Olympic plates, or at least an Olympic plate. And then just mostly my 90 pound. I mean, I'm not lifting 90 pounds, but 90 pound dumbbells, power blocks. Yeah. I mean, I'll go. Wow, I gotta close that window. I go to the studio to get like to use the TRX or any other equipment I might want. But we've got a barbell there too. Not that I really use it too much. Sometimes I'll do, go in and do some barbell deadlifts just for shits and gigs. But yeah, for the most part, between the studio and what I've got here, I'm happy doing my dumbbell stuff mixed with floor exercises. And I told you that I started endurance training again, right?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, very gently, but I used to run quite a bit, especially we did talk about in Long Beach how we were running on the sand. And that's when I used to run regularly. And it's been a while since I've done that. And the last time I went to run it was right after I got sober, and I had put on a lot of weight because I'd gotten sober, so I was eating my booze calories. And also, for anybody like myself who has struggled with any kind of addiction and gotten, into recovery, you'll know that when you first get into recovery, you're looking for a way to fuel that feeling, right? That hole that you've been trying to fill with whatever drug or alcohol or whatever you've been using. So I was last time I went to endurance train, I was the heaviest I had. I think the heaviest I have ever been in my life. Now let me qualify and say it was not the least and the most out of shape I've been in my life. I gained a bunch of weight, but that's when I actually went, I've talked about how I've gained muscle weight lately. That was when I gained the muscle weight, but I gained a lot of muscle weight and a lot of fat weight all at once. So the last time I tried to go out running was right after I gained all this fat weight and all this muscle weight. And so like my feet, like I went out and my feet were just like, guy. And like, no way. Like I started running and my feet like about, I want to say like less than a quarter mile, probably honestly a quarter mile, even saying quarter mile is probably being generous. But after a very short period of time, my feet were just like, no, you're not like you are walking. Like it was not an option, right? Whereas this time around, I've started back up and I'm not the leanest I've been. I'm probably the strongest I've been. But I'm definitely the strongest and the leanest I've been. So it's been such a different experience heading out this time. Still, starting slow and, I mean, this for me, it's always going to be the case. I'll always walk when I need to. But a lot of walking up front, you know what I mean? And just like my first run was basically a walk with, jaunts peppered in, but starting back on my path. And one of the fun things about starting a particular type of training when you've been either it's not what you usually do or you've been neglecting it is that you get mad results right at the front. So it's super fun.
Yeah, walking though, dude, I love walking. I
Hmm.
always every day, no matter what type of training I'm doing, I'm walking a lot. It's the most underrated thing you can do, or one of the
Totally.
most underrated things that you can
Yeah,
do.
you almost caught yourself with the subject for today, huh?
Yeah, I was like, not the most. Maybe it's tied. Maybe it's tied. But no, it's that walking. Nevertheless, is very, very underrated. Just for
Yeah,
health in general. And know what
totally.
type of person I think it's such a cool way to train. I don't know if you've seen any like hybrid athletes before.
Hybrid athletes, what are they just blending different disciplines?
Yeah, so it's basically you're combining strength training, but you're also training for endurance. Now, those are two
Oh,
opposing
cool.
things. We've talked
Yeah.
about that, and I've talked about how when I've done that, it didn't work out so well. But then again, it was CrossFit. It wasn't
Right.
like I was just strength training, and later in the day, just endurance training. It's like CrossFit's like combining everything at one time at the same time. So like hybrid. how I've seen people do it at least. So they do the standard strength training a couple days a week.
Mm.
They're doing all the big compound lifts and maybe some of the single joint movements too, but not quite as much. But then, some of their days they'll have 2 sessions in the day, and like the later session will be, an actual endurance run or something like that. I just thought it seemed like such a cool way to train.
Yeah.
I don't know how I would respond that way. I mean, I do aerobic work. I don't even want to say the word endurance training. I don't know if
Hmm.
that's really appropriate, I guess, but what a cool way to a cool way to stimulate your body. You know what I mean? I feel like doing that, if you could find the right dose of that,
Yeah.
your body would be prepared for just about anything because you're still doing all the strength stuff, and then you're still getting the endurance work. But you do have to be careful for the interference effect of that, obviously, and doing so much to where you couldn't recover. But if you did find the sweet spot, man, that would be a lot of fun. But it'd be time consuming also if you're doing true endurance work and a strength training session the same day. That's definitely that's
Yeah.
at least
That's a
a
lot.
couple hours right there.
Not only is that a lot hours wise, but that's a lot like emotionally. You know what I mean? Like working
Yeah.
out is an emotional, spiritual thing, regardless of how each individual might perceive it. And I'm not saying, let me take a step back. For me, it's definitely all those things, and a lot of times we are venturing into those realms without even necessarily realizing it. For example, a lot of times we get up and we work out because we want to look good for summer. But the byproduct of that is that we get this really nice, endorphin buzz going on and a sense of peace that we didn't know that we really wanted, which ultimately may be the reason why you get up and go the next day, not the summer body thing, right? Um, anyway, I don't know what my point was as much as just to say that, um, I don't know.
Yeah, we'll want to talk about. So I said walking about being the most underrated or one of them. Let's get into the fitness focus for today and talk about the most neglected way that people train, or what is neglected most in people's training programs. And I didn't realize this really till the other day. This was in part because me realizing for myself I wasn't doing this enough, and I've never been. And I'm always looking for ways to slightly refine my process and improve my training, to some capacity to help reach my goals, whatever that is. This could be adding movements I enjoy or just the functionality of movements, whatever it is. I'm always trying to refine. And as I was creating content, I was sitting there, when I was writing out the outline for this episode, I was sitting there thinking, man, I have been lacking training in the transverse plane
Mhm.
for my entire training career. I think at the top of my head, the only transverse plane movements I've really done. Every once in a while, I used to do like Russian med ball twists, but that wasn't like consistent. We just do that every once in a while. But before we get into transverse plane and what that is, we're going to go over very briefly the 3 planes of movement and what they are. And then we'll go into a bit of detail about the transverse plane and why it could be a good idea for you to train this way. So, there are 3 main planes of movement. So number one's the sagittal plane, number two is the frontal plane, and then number three, which I was just talking about, is the transverse plane. Now, the sagittal plane, think of movements where our body goes forward and back. And I would say this is the most popular plane that people train in, at least what I see at the gym. I see this the most. Now, this would be anything from a back squat to a lunge to a bicep curl. So, if you can imagine your body is going to go a little bit forward in those movements or a little bit back with the weight, if you can kind of picture that. Next is going to be the frontal plane. So think of any lateral or side movement. Now, this could be, say, a dumbbell raise. This is probably, or excuse me, a dumbbell lateral raise. That is probably going to be the most popular frontal movement you're going to see. And then also a Cossack squat, that would also be in the lateral plane. And last, the one we're talking about today is the transverse plane. So think of any twisting movement or any spinal motion. Now, technically, this doesn't have to be your spine, it can be your limbs, but for the purposes of today, I'm referring to just your spine. So it's a twisting movement, okay? Now, for an example, this would be a wood chop, which I haven't done those too many times, but that's a popular one.
Really? I love wood
This could
choppers.
be a rotational med ball throw, or this can be a Russian twist, as I mentioned earlier. Now, the transverse plane, the movement, at least relating to the spine, it primarily involves a lot of muscles of your core, specifically your internal and your external obliques. It's going to involve your serratus anterior, which is can be a pretty neglected muscle as well. Your rectus abdominis, and then your transverse abdominis. So a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of the muscles of at least your more anterior portion of your core. So I rarely see people training in this plane of motion. Now, most of the movements in this plane of motion aren't necessarily sexy, I guess you could say.
Mm.
So many people just don't utilize them. And normally, when you train in this plane of motion, it's not going to be movements necessarily that you can do a ton of weight, or at least most people won't be able to. So, in my opinion, one of the reasons it is so important to train exercises in the transverse plane is the functionality of them. Now, technically, any movement or any exercise you can do, you can make the case that any exercise is functional. Okay. It's everything in a way, depending on your goal, can be functional fitness. That word is very much abused and misused in the fitness industry, by the way, and people say functional fitness. But, anyways, I digress a little bit there. Let me illustrate the point and why it's important. I could have talked about that for another 10 minutes.
No, I felt like you were like a dog on a walk, and you were still walking, but you're tracking it with your head.
I know. I was about to get off the leash there for a second. So, anyway, so let me kind of illustrate this for you a little, for all you a little bit. So when I was working as a firefighter medic, something that we would do regularly is lift patients, and we would do this in sometimes very awkward angles. And many times the patient would be non-ambulatory, meaning they couldn't walk, and they'd be confined to a bed. That would be, a pretty common thing we would see going on these 911 calls. So we would have to move the patient over from the bed over to our gurney, which we would place right at the side of the bed. Now, if you can picture this in your head, I know it might be a little bit hard to visualize this, but so there would be some of us at the foot of the bed, some would be at the head of the bed, and we as a team would lift the patient, twist and turn, and then put the patient on the gurney. If you can kind of picture what I'm saying there. So this would require that spinal motion or twisting, which again, it's performed in the transverse plane. And I I really wish I would have trained like this in the gym. It would have significantly helped me, in my career by doing this and exposing myself to that specific plane and those specific stimuluses and exercises to prepare me better for the job. Now, another example too, where I could see this having a big carryover to real life is if you're a parent and you are having
Hmm.
to lift your kid in and out of your crib. Sometimes there's a little bit of a twisting motion with your spine to be able to do that. So you are doing this in the transverse plane. So very important to do for multiple situations, or even if I didn't describe you in either of those, it's still important to do these movements just to be well rounded. I would make the argument for that too. Now, I literally, Clay, I just started doing med ball throws in the transverse plane
Ooh,
at the gym
sounds
because I
fun.
realized, what was that?
That sounds fun.
Yeah, so but the funny thing is, I mean, it was such a lightweight. I'm
Mm.
sure I looked really funny, so I was doing little med ball throws, twisting right next to the wall. And I was using a really light med ball, but I
Good.
was like, you know what? I don't ever do these. I don't want this to be an ego thing and have a
Yeah.
50-pound med ball or something like that, and hurt myself or do whatever. So I started really light and just did a few sets, and then decided, okay, I'm going to start incorporating these into my program because I do believe they are important.
You know what you have to do when you go, especially up with a heavier med ball, is you got to do the dramatic grunt with the throw, right? You go.
Oh my gosh.
I make
One
fun,
of, one
but
of those people.
yeah, I make fun, but the reality is there is an advantage to, you know, the grunt and groaning that you hear people lifting with it. You know, it gives you a little hit of adrenaline, a little hit of testosterone, and you know that helps you get through you know, a rep. But a lot of people, and especially in the gym environment, are doing it for, you know, like Jake and I talk about, ego reasons. You know, they want to be seen or heard. You know what I mean? But
I don't I don't hear too many, or I haven't heard too many people do that at the gym that I train at now, which
nice.
is surprising because it has every type of person there. Like the standard kind of bodybuilder person has all the machines and equipment necessary for that. And then there's a room that would be more considered, like, if you want to call it the strength and conditioning room, that's where like the barbells are and GHD. Some CrossFit people will go in there, people deadlifting, squatting, all of that. There's a bunch of rigs in there. And even there, I don't think I've really heard anyone yell like that. But then again, I'm always wearing, my like somewhat noise canceling headphones. So I don't know, maybe people are screaming and I'm just not hearing.
I have to say, I think for folks like you and me who have spent a lot of time in gyms, we just don't notice it too. Because especially people like you and me who are a little more maybe confident and or competent in the gym, because we're not in there looking at other people. You know what I mean? You're gonna notice things going on around you, but you know like there's no use of some of us thinking about, and it's not like us, but like, you know, if you spend a lot of time in the gym, it's like it's just somebody making noise during their workout. You know what I mean? It's like, anyway, not to say you've seen it or not, but I do want to note that while you were talking about the different people who might benefit from the transverse um, activities, is it occurred to me while we are talking about it, is golfers big time. If you're a
Oh, there you
golfer,
go.
or if you play, like, I don't know, pickleball is a big thing these days, especially with middle-aged folks. Any you know, tennis, maybe I would even argue maybe a little bit of bocce ball. I don't know, but anything where you probably not bocce. You know, tennis, badminton, anything where you're kind of using proper, if you're using good technique, right? Which is the
Did you
caveat.
say baseball? Did you
Oh,
say baseball
definitely
too?
baseball. I didn't say baseball, but baseball is
Okay.
is probably maybe even the number one example, because of when you're swinging a bat, as most folks know at this point, you know, you're swinging, you start with the hips. You're swinging from the hips, and that starts your entire body movement, right? But you're going along that transverse plane, or did I say that right? You're using the transverse movement at least.
Hmm.
So yeah, so golfers, any tennis players, anything like that. I don't remember
And I
anything I
don't
had to
even
point
think,
out.
like, as far as athletes, I don't think every piece of your training necessarily you have to be like, okay, does this transfer over perfectly? Does this movement exactly mimic what I'm
Right.
doing on the field? That doesn't have to be the reason why you're training a
Yeah.
certain way. I think it is a good idea to do movements like that. But I mean, the thought where these athletes that rotate that way, like you're just describing, to be able to train in a controlled setting, outside of a game and work in that transverse plane, it's going to benefit them a ton. So I think it's
Yeah.
a very smart thing to do. Athletes or just really everyday people.
Oh yeah, everyday people, absolutely. And if you think about it, it's probably the everyday person who doesn't have to do that movement every day that's actually at the highest risk of injury doing that movement some random time when they're kind of forced to by circumstance, right? So the idea is, for the regular person, that if you are training a little bit more actively in the style, when you are forced by circumstance in real life to perform that behavior, your body's going to be prepared to handle it, hopefully without injury.
Yeah, it seems as though like people that injure their backs, like, at home or something, like that, it's because they're performing a motion or a movement that they aren't really prepared for necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's like they bend over a little bit too quick or they turn a little bit too quick. Now, I don't want to act like something like that that's like setting you up for injury, because I think that's pretty ridiculous. Our spines are very robust and resilient, but generally speaking, though, when there's some type of demand that your body's nowhere used to doing, then you
Mm-hmm.
could set yourself up for definitely some little, I don't even want to say injuries, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So very important,
The
very important.
idea with this is that if this is a neglected exercise, it is potentially a neglected place in your musculature, right? So by working this, you are effectively performing preventative healthcare on yourself potentially, right?
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Well, let's go into topic number 2 for today, and that's going to be our thoughts on cookie cutter programming. Now, I first want to say before we get into this that any program that you do that is getting you to move where you might not have been moving otherwise, that's great. I am completely for that. Okay, even if the programming isn't great. If it gets you to move and you weren't going to move otherwise, then do it. That's fantastic. So I know I trash talk, a lot of these cookie cutter programs or challenges. Sometimes I'm not always the biggest fan, but if this is what you need to get yourself to move, then by all means, please do it. So make sure if you get anything out of the podcast today that it's not me saying that you can't or it's terrible for everyone. So just please keep that in mind. But let me give you an example. And this was brought to my attention about a week or two ago. And this will explain, maybe illustrate a little bit more why I'm not always a fan of cookie cutter style programs. So, a fitness Instagram influencer, it always starts with that.
Yeah, right.
It always starts with that, it feels like. They were selling a cookie cutter program, or a better way to describe what I mean is a non individualized training program. And this was targeted heavily at women and also at women that want to concentrate on growing their glutes because that's just a huge thing.
Shocking.
It seems as though everyone talks about that all the time now at the gym. I'm not even kidding. It feels like half the gym is just doing hip thrusts for half the time. I'm not even kidding, dude. It's pretty crazy. But very popular right now to do that. Now, this program that was brought to my attention, there was somewhere near 40 sets of leg exercises per week, with a ton of that being glute volume. Now, most people, especially looking at this through the lens of just the general population of people, since that's who it's being advertised to, most people do not need anywhere close to that volume with one, muscle group. Yes, your legs could do more than maybe other parts of your body. I would make the case for that for sure.
Sure.
But for some, this amount of volume could actually hinder you from getting you to your goals. It will slow you down almost a little bit. And we've talked about this before, the dose response relationship with the amount of sets you do to build muscle. And yes, you do need adequate volume, absolutely, but there's going to be diminishing returns once you do too much. So too much normally means where you get fatigued to the point where it affects your ability to recover from movement, or I guess more specifically, recover in between sessions. That would be a better way to describe it. And of course, the individual that showed me this program was pretty fatigued and not necessarily making the improvements that they wanted. So don't want to bash the program, but I just recommending that many sets to everyone, I think it's a little bit too much. So, but my suggestion, if I can give you one of those today, is if you buy a non-individualized program or cookie cutter program, again, nothing wrong with that, but just hear me out here. Make sure you modify it to where you need it to be. Okay. Yep. So just because it says do 40 sets for legs this week doesn't mean that you do have to do that amount. Adjust the volume if you have to. So that's going to be, I would say, the main thing I would suggest. I'm sure some of these programs could do wonders for people, especially if the person programming has an idea of what they're doing. As long as you have that in your mind that you can adjust if you need to, then go ahead and do that. And another way to think about this too, which I feel like we've talked about a lot lately on the show too, Clay, is you can always add more. So if you're worried, okay, I don't want to go, below the 40 sets, like what's going to happen? So worst case, say you drop down to 30 sets or 25, whatever you choose, and you do that for a little bit and you feel like you're not making progress, then you can always add more. That's at least my opinion with that.
Yeah, I'm just going to pretty much echo what you said, which is to say, there's nothing wrong with these programs. Explore them, enjoy them. Just know that downside of any of these programs, it's so funny. I literally was just saying this to a client like 3 days ago. It's good or bad or whatever you want to call a program, as effective as a program may or may not be, no matter what, unless there's a personalization process going on, that workout is not meant for you specifically. That workout is meant to cover it a broad range of folks and maximize effectiveness within this broad range of demographic, right? So a well-writ cookie cutter program, air quotes again in there, a well-written cookie cutter program is going to absolutely be generally the right idea for most people, but then you get lost in the
That's fair.
crowds, you know? So,
Yeah, that's fair.
right? So it's important that when you are using these programs, as Jake just said, that you're willing to adjust them to how you know that you operate. I would even venture to say that regardless of who you're working with, even if you are working with a really good personal trainer, you should still be like, you're still the one who knows whether that's a good idea for you or not, right? So like I always tell clients, especially when I get to meet them, um, I'm sure I'm the expert, but you're the boss because you're the one who tells me whether you are comfortable doing these behaviors, doing these actions or not. So whether working, even I again, like I was like, even with a person or whether working from a cookie cutter program, your ability to say, hey, I'm comfortable with this. Hey, I'm not comfortable with this. Hey, okay, I'm uncomfortable with this, but I'm willing to try it, is going to be key to not only your success with results, but the success of either the program or the trainer, because the program is going to be more successful because it's going to be more tuned to who you are based on your own input. And the training, working with a trainer, a good trainer is going to adjust their program based on your input. So it's always a good idea to be sharing your thoughts and your feelings and what you think about and how effective a program is working for you, or how you're feeling about different exercises with your, the person who's making your program or the person who's training you.
I did want to throw in a few things, like at least some positive points. If you do buy, a random training program on the internet, the first one, it's most likely going to cost a lot less than a personal trainer. Most of the time, they're pretty affordable, so I could really see the utility there. And then I have noticed, plenty of different, I guess you could call them fitness, not fitness companies, but strength and conditioning coaches, powerlifting coaches, just whoever, certain coaches really do know what they're doing, and they put out a basic plan for the general population. And normally there is a caveat in there saying, if for whatever reason this is too much, then modify it here. If this causes you pain, whatever it may be, the good programs will normally say that. So there is some benefit. Some people writing these, they do an excellent job, and it's more affordable. So access to be able to do it, is definitely, understood. If someone can't afford, say their area that trainers are 100 an hour, whatever someone charges in the area, it's dependent, and that's too much. But then, the training program you're paying for online is $9 a month. So that's just a consideration with that too. All right,
One other thing I would
oh,
want
go
to
ahead.
throw in there is don't be averse to trying a little bit of both in your life, because there's no reason why you can't be working from a program and be talking to a trainer about how you're working from that program. In fact, if you get a good program and a good trainer, that's the recipe for success.
Yeah.
Not that I'm suggesting that anybody should go out and find a program and a trainer. I'm just saying you never know, right? The idea of being communicative and ultimately driving towards what's right for you is the take home message.
All right, let's finish off our episode today with a Q&A. And the question for today, which I really, really like this question, and that is, what are your recommendations for someone new to resistance training? So this is a great question. It can be pretty broad or even ambiguous, but we're going to go over at least a few things that I think are good considerations if you're new to resistance training. And this can even be if you're a little bit experienced. I don't want to put an exact time on it. Someone could say you're a beginner for 2 years. Some will say 6 months. I don't have an exact time, so you're going to have to be the judge of what that means. So I'm just going to say, generally speaking, a beginner. So the first thing here, there should be, I heard this the other day. So this idea that I'm about to say didn't come from me, but I really, really like this. And so there should be a concentration on self-efficacy, aka your training. It should be an enhancement to your life, and it should make you feel confident that you can execute the behaviors necessary to reach your goals. So being able to self-manage and it being the self-efficacy portion in general, I think that's really important, especially for someone new. So we'll start with that. And then beginners will very much benefit from doing full body workouts. Now, I feel like a hypocrite saying that because when I started, I didn't do full body workouts. I was following my friend's older brother, and he had the, Arnold encyclopedia, and we were doing straight up bodybuilding workouts, which was still great. You can still make progress, but I think it's a great idea for someone that is new to resistance training to do full body workouts, opposed to you call it a bodybuilding splitter, where you do different muscle groups 5 or 6 days a week, where you hit the muscle probably 1 day a week. You, in my opinion, are going to benefit from doing full body, and just more bang for your buck, I guess, would be, the best way to say it. Now, instead of doing this, arms one day, shoulders the next day, chest the next day, legs the next day, what I would recommend doing in the beginning is start resistance training 2, maybe 3 times a week. Again, this is going to be dependent on your lifestyle and what you are willing to do. If you're someone that hates even the thought of resistance training or being in a gym or whatever it is, if you could give 1 day a week, that's amazing. Okay. If that's what you can give, then do that. But generally speaking, most will be safe to do so. Doing this 2 times, maybe 3 times a week, that would definitely be okay too. But you're going to have to make the call. And it's best too if you're someone that doesn't feel like you stick to stuff. Maybe start with the lower amount, maybe 1 or 2 days a week. See what you think and go from there, because the adherence and the consistency is going to be way more important in the long run than worrying that you did 2 sessions this week versus 3. So keep that in mind. Now, so 2 to 3 days a week. And the other part of the recommendation in the beginning, I would recommend you give yourself at least a day of rest in between your resistance training sessions. So a great idea would be Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So you have the Tuesday and Thursday to rest and recover from resistance training. Now, I wouldn't say don't move on those days. I wouldn't say just sit there on the couch. You could do some light movement, maybe walking or whatever light aerobic work, something like that is perfectly fine. But the 3 days a week with a day of rest in between with resistance training is going to benefit you very much. I'm sure no matter how easy you take it, if you've never performed resistance training before, you're probably going to be a little bit sore. Even if you do take it really easy, I would make that argument. So give yourself some time to recover. Now, on top of that, with the resistance training, as far as you helping yourself, as far as cardiorespiratory fitness, okay, and improving that, I would say make sure you're doing a dedicated cardio workout 1 day a week, okay? I know a lot of people hate doing aerobic work, the cyclical work, and it's boring and it's not quite as fun as lifting barbells or dumbbells, but it's very important, and not only for your health, but it's also going to help you with your strength training as long as you don't overdo it. Doing the aerobic work, it's going to help you be able to recover in between sets when you're doing your strength work. So it can actually really benefit you as long as you don't overdo it. So if you could at least get a session or 2 a week, and I'm not talking anything crazy or high intensity or anything like that. This could be something like walking on a treadmill on an incline for 30 minutes or being on a bike, something like that. So 1 or 2 days a week with that would be perfectly safe and good to do so. And the next part of the recommendation, let's go more back to resistance training, but you could apply this to the aerobic or cardio workouts as well, is to not overexert yourself at first.
Yep.
I want there to be challenge for you. That's fine. But a huge mistake that I saw when I was a teenager, and this wasn't just me, this was probably most people that I was around that were my age, was going to failure just on every set. So every set you're exerting yourself 100%. You're redlining every single time because it's very hard to believe, at least for me, it was very hard to believe when I was young that you could still make progress even if you weren't going 100% on every set. I literally thought that way. Even when I would hear from time to time that you didn't have to do that, I didn't really believe it. So I'm telling you right now, you don't have to do that. You don't have to go to failure every set. I'd probably urge you not to do that.
Yeah,
So don't
believe it.
over exert yourself on your lifts. And don't worry about doing really high loads of volume either. Worry more about learning the movements efficiently. So I would like you to get some decent time under tension, meaning you're doing enough reps to where you start getting comfortable with the movement pattern. But we don't need to be training the same way a professional bodybuilder is that's been training for 20 years. So that I would definitely recommend you don't do that. So it's not worry about doing tons and tons of volume, as again, it's going to impact your ability to recover before the next session. Another thing I do recommend, if you are able, is to start learning the multi-joint movements first. Example, some of the big ones: bench press, deadlift, squat. This could be pull-ups. This could be dips, if I didn't already say that.
Rows.
Learn these movements first, okay, if you can. There's nothing wrong with doing machines or doing single joint or accessory type work. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But let's start learning the movement patterns with all of these different lifts. It's going to definitely benefit you. It's more of an all entire body type of strength effect that you're going to get from doing these lifts. And in the beginning too, with like newbie gains, you're going to get stronger and build muscle way faster than someone that's been in the gym for years. So keep that in mind. But learn the multi-joint movements first. Another part of that, especially doing these multi-joint movements, learn to move in a controlled fashion. So on the show, we talk a lot about you want to own your range of motion and own the weight. You don't want it to own you. Okay. So this is essentially, Clayton made a great point yesterday talking about how important it is to be controlled. I mentioned balanced. So that's something to consider. So make sure you're balanced and controlled while you're performing these movements. There's no need to do them super fast either in the beginning. I would even make the argument, if you go a little bit slower than you think you should, that's okay too. You are typically more in control when we slow the tempo down just a little bit in the movements, especially when you're learning them. And then over time, as you become, I don't even want to say intermediate, but as you get a little bit more experience with lifting, then you can start increasing your exercise variety. So you are exposed to new movements at that point. Variety for someone that's newer or even quote unquote intermediate, I think that's a great thing to expose yourself to that. It's going to make you more well-rounded. So yeah, those are a few very important points I have for a new person. Clay, do you have anything else with any tips or any ideas for this one?
My addition to this conversation would be once again just more of a reiteration in my own words of what you just said, because you just spent a lot of time talking about the details of how to do what I'm about to say, which is be easy on yourself. I think this is probably fair to say across most resistance trainers or most people who do resistance training, but especially when we're learning, we have an idea of this old, no pain, no gain mentality, especially when we're coming to it without proper education, that leads us to lifting too much weight with poor form, causing injury, ultimately keeping us from doing the training that we want to do to grow and build. And in particular, if you're somebody, especially a young person, a young person who wants to tack on muscle mass, it's really important that you follow this be easy on yourself advice, because you've just started a Forrest Gump marathon run. There's no sprint that you don't build muscle mass by sprinting to the finish. You build it by habitually building and executing discipline. Every, maybe not every single day, but with a regular continuous pattern. And if you do that successfully, maybe a year and a half, 2 years down the line, you're going to have the body that you see in your mind. But it's not going to happen before that. And for the folks that it does happen quicker than that, one, they got lucky, they got that genetic lottery. Two, there's the performance enhancing drugs that can help you do that quicker. I think that would be pretty much it for the most part. The rest of us, male, female, whatever, you're talking about a couple year journey in order to get to this ideal that you have probably in your head. And even then, chances are your body's not going to look the way that you thought in your head. So what are we rushing towards, right? So being easy on ourselves by practicing all the things that Jake just said and not creating an artificial scarcity that you need to get all this working out in now so you can get really buff really fast. Taking a step back and realizing that this isn't a sprint, this is a marathon. This is a long-term goal that requires daily execution, and that by telling ourselves we're not in some rush to get to some idealistic body type, all of a sudden we can shift into a place where, okay, I'm getting up and working out because I know that after I work out, I'm going to feel really good. And when we start looking at it from that perspective, which starts with us being easy on ourselves emotionally, physically, spiritually, even just taking it easy on ourselves, not pushing ourselves too hard. And this is, let me be clear. Absolutely, you want to push your reps. Absolutely, you want to push your weight. But there's a different mentality. There's two different mentalities about it. One, I got to get there, and I'm going to beat myself up if I don't do X amount of sets today or the X amount of weight, right? And then the second path, which is what I'm talking about, which is I'm going to get up, I'm going to do what I can today, and we're going to make some progress. And then the next day we'll make some more progress. And then the next day we'll make some more progress. And just, being confident that taking that long, discipline path it will eventually, especially if you're applying the knowledge and the technique that we talk about here, it's going to happen for you. You just got to be patient. And, if when we beat ourselves up or we are too hard on ourselves, oftentimes that can prolong our journey to whatever point you're trying to reach.
Now, I want to reiterate or expand a little bit on what you were just saying because I liked it so much. In the beginning, if you can get to the mentality as fast as you can about, I know this is so cliche, but really enjoying the process, okay? Yeah. And not obsessing over these tangible goals. I know it's hard to say and believe that, and especially in the beginning, because having a specific goal or this tangible goal about how much weight you want to lift or how you want to look, it gives you something to aim at. So I see the utility with that, but the day that you give up, like having to lift a very specific amount of weight to be happy, or you have to look exactly like this to be happy, or you have to have all 8 of your abs showing at every moment to be happy.
There's 8 of them? I'm just kidding.
Seems like there's 12 for some people, but anyways, though, when we get past that to where you need these very specific things, to one day when that comes to be happy, and you truly enjoy the process, there is success in just that transition in your mentality. Because at that point, you're doing this for the rest of your life. When you can get to the point where you go because you enjoy it, and of course you want to make progress, you want to get stronger, you have these goals, absolutely. But when it becomes part of your life and your routine, and you enjoy doing that outside of these external things, then you've made it, in my opinion. Then you've absolutely
Absolutely.
made it.
You know what you just made me think of, dude, is a beginning snowboarder. Like anybody who any snowboarder, most snowboarders have had this experience where you get out on the snow and for a long time it hurts. You fall, you catch your edges, you're learning, like one side, so your calves burn for a whole day. But then you hit a certain point where all of a sudden you learn to curve naturally. And then all of a sudden it's like all of the stress and all of the challenge that got in the way of the fun of snowboarding is all gone, and all of a sudden all you have left is the fun. And it's the same with lifting. It's really the same with lifting. Is there's a lot of like, okay, I got to do this in order to make it effective and efficient, and then you do it again and you do it again and you do it again, and then eventually you're not thinking about it, and you're got to the point that kind of Jake and I are talking about, where like literally, like I work out generally speaking because I know that I'm gonna be happier and like a nicer and better person after I work out. Like I work out so that I'm better to the people that I love. You know what I mean? Like sure, yeah, I'd love to put on some weight and that's what I'm doing right now. But I work out so that I'm not a dick to the person my partner. You know what I mean? And not to say that not working out gives any justification to be a dick, but I tend to be a better person when I exercise. And part of that is because of what we're talking about, is because I get a moment to focus on myself, release some endorphins, and walk down a road of progress that I think is really compelling to a lot of us. And a big part of the reason why we're here, because we're walking this path and we just want to have a handout. And if you'd like to join us, join us.
All right, everyone. We hope you enjoyed the episode today. If you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the show if the content has been bringing you value. If you'd like to find us on Instagram, you can find us at Mission Driven Made. You can also find us on Facebook. We have a free fitness platform called The Forum. So if you go to Mission Driven Made the forum on Facebook, you can find us there. And this is a place where other listeners of the podcast can go to converse with each other, and also a place to go to ask us any fitness questions that you may have. We'd be happy to answer those for you. I'm also going to link the forum in the show notes for you guys. All right, everyone, we hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, stay mission driven.
All right, Twitch viewers, you have your opportunity to ask Jake and I all the pressing questions that you may have. Whether it's personal, no, try to keep them fitness related. If you do have any questions, whether you're watching live or you're listening on, again, I always say listening on Spotify, but they're never listening to me say this part. So if you're on whatever and you hear and this isn't live, make sure you know that you can reach us on any of those places Jake just mentioned. Instagram, the forum, or we're here on Twitch 3 days a week, so come and ask live. Anyway, guys, stay mission driven, as Mr. Jakey likes to say.